Hi folks, welcome once again to a Gaz Labs short video, and today we're going to be looking at the Foundation License Now manual. One of the following on from last week's video when I was speaking about sort of one of the most common questions I'm asked. This is another common question I've asked: how do I get into amateur radio? Well, number one, you're going to need to find probably this book. Okay. That's a good place start as any. It's just been updated for 2019, and there have been some changes since the last iteration of it. Okay, a little bit about the book. This has been done by Alan Betts. Now, he's been around as long as I can remember, yeah, it's quite well laid out. Goes into a bit of a preface and talks, talks about the book, how it's been put together, that sort of stuff, and then it goes into an introduction and a little bit about the author. And what I would first of all, what I would suggest is that you pop along somewhere in here. There's a link to a page where there are a list of corrections and updates. Now, what I've done here, you can see I've just downloaded that document and printed it. You can, if you want to, you can cut this up and put it in where the relevant places. That's entirely up to you. I haven't. I've just done that. Right, okay, first of all, okay, in chapter 1 it talks about the training course itself. It speaks about the practical assessment. It then talks about the syllabus and where you can find a training course. But then also the big question that is often asked is, how much will it cost? Well, the answer is it's not going to cost a huge amount of money. Typically, I think the exam is less than £50, or with the training, everything all in is less than £50. For those of you that want to go your own way, you don't have to do a training course, okay? But you still will need to sit the practical, and you still will need to sit the examination, and you obviously pay for those. Then it talks about materials and information. Well, information is everywhere, okay? I mean, you can go into your local sort of ham radio emporium, and there's lots and lots of information available. Or you can go on the interweb, and there's lots of information available there. Cost of equipment. Equipment here, they talk about it can cost from £50 up to £200 or above. Well, that's quite true. Okay, you can buy a couple of Bofang radios for less than £50, and you can spend more than £200. In fact, you can spend more than £10,000 if you really wished on a ham radio equipment. Me personally, you won't find me very often on the radio. It just doesn't float my boat. You'll tend to find me sort of behind the scenes. Maybe I do a few repairs here. I do a lot of homebrew, but for me, once the project's working, that's it. It's done. And that's how I got into ham radio. Is quite simply through electronics. I mean, up until fairly recently, I've been repairing bits and pieces for a friend who does a lot of stuff with auction musical instruments. So then. Moving swiftly on in the book, we talk about technical basics. Now, this talks about the units and symbols that are going to be used throughout the book, and the sort of like basically the terminology that will be used basically in the hobby itself. Okay, now this is quite a big section, so you can guarantee that there will be some questions asked about this. Luckily, there are some really good visuals here that make it easy to memorise. Again, what I would do in the exam is when you get in there, make sure you jot these things down on the piece of paper provided, if they give you one. I don't know how it works these days, but just make sure you get those out of your head so you're not worrying about them. Okay, so symbols and diagrams, they talk a little bit about this, and a few little basic circuits and calculating current, most likely, in that. They also talk a bit about wavelength, and they then start to name and classify the the bands in frequency and sort of like medium wave, high frequency, that sort of stuff. And that continues for, say, like quite a big section. But then it drifts off into transmitters. Now, obviously, as a foundation license holder, transmitters are kind of a bit out of your reach in that you can't make your own transmitters. However, they do expect you to know just a little bit about them and how a radio circuit is put together in a block diagram. Again, these are sort of things that you can essentially, because they're quite visual, you can quite easily memorize just how they go together and just get them out of your head on the scrap of paper that they provide. So you can just whiz them down, get them into the little thing, so you can just see them in the exam, and that's how I would approach it, and that's how I did approach it. Okay, so they talk a little bit more about wavelengths and transmitters and the way that transmitters work, and sideband and data modulation and all that sort of good stuff. And then obviously in balance, they also then talk about receivers. Again, they do block diagrams here of the different receivers, and again, you can, if you want to, you can memorize those, get them out of your head in the exam. Feeders and antennas. Now this one's quite interesting to me, because when I did my foundation exam, once did we put a plug on. Now I was quite amazed by that, because I thought that was pretty basic. The first thing that you're going to do in ham radio is put a plug on. They do talk about the different types of feeders. They do talk about the different types of plugs, and they talk about it's necessary to use the correct type of plug here, and yeah, so yeah, it does talk about these sort of things, but I'm not sure that you still put them on in the exam. I'll be intrigued to know if that is the case now. They talk about sort of connecting feed sort of cables and quarter wave antennas and Yagi antennas, and what the difference is, what a Yagi does, and that sort of stuff. Again, here they've got a little tiny 5/8 wave ground plane antenna there going on, a little bit of a long wire antenna, and the different sort of patterns that you can get from them. And that sort of thing. Polarization, feeding and matching of antennas, standing waves and SWR meters. There's plenty there really to get on with in there. And then obviously there's a few things here about antenna matching units and what they do and what they actually are. And then they talk about balance or impedance transformers, and what they do and what they're used for. And they also then mention dummy loads here as well, and why you would want one, why you need one, and what it's used for. They also mention the dipole there and where the balun or a balun, what it's used for. They go into propagation. They talk about the way that radio waves spread and the way buildings can affect them, and also the range that you can expect with certain bands. That goes on a little way, and then we start to get into the sort of crux, I think, of the foundation exam, and that is the license conditions. This is sort of one of the big parts of the foundation exam. They want to make sure that you understand the license conditions and how it affects you, and make sure that you abide by them, basically. And you can see this is instantly, it's a big section. So again, you can guarantee that this will be mentioned in the exam. And there's a little ad as well for the Radio Society of Great Britain. Personally, I'm not a member, but I think probably if you're thinking about getting into radio or you are in radio, perhaps you should join in with the Radio Society. It's not hugely expensive, but yeah, so yeah, go for it. Okay, this is another big section. Okay, this is chapter 9. This is the operating practices and procedures. They talk about in this sort of section how you are expected to behave, essentially where you can go, where you can't go. They may even, I don't know whether it's in that section, they start to talk about who you can take messages for and all that sort of stuff in one of the sections. I can't remember which. They will ask you that question or something along those lines. This is the band plan. Now, if I remember rightly, they give you this copy of this in the examination. So don't go hell for leather and try and memorise this part verbatim, because it's not really worth it, to be honest. They give you this actually in the exam. Do check though before you go, but I'm fairly confident they gave you this in the exam. And again, you can go up-to-date band plans at the RSGB website. Again, it's all available there. And again, this goes on and on and on. They talk about logs and transceiver controls, initial calls, CQ, signal reports, digital voice operation, HFSSB, and all that sort of stuff. And it goes on and on and on. They talk about repeaters, satellite operation, desk microphones, phonetic alphabet, the jargon, and the etiquette. As you can see, this is a big section. They will be asking you questions on that. EMC, or electromagnetic compatibility. They talk about how interference is caused and what can be done to minimise interference. And again, there's a choice of antenna, earthing, power modes, mobile operation, and equipment immunity. And they talk about how to wind ferrite rings as well in there. And again, it goes on, and who to talk to in the event that you've got an issue, and how to deal with neighbours that maybe you are having an effect on. And you keep a log just to make sure that everyone knows when you're on, and when the interference is happening, that maybe you can say, well, actually, I wasn't on then. And they talk about Ofcom, and in difficult cases they may be able to help. Well, good luck with that one, but they could help. Safety considerations. Now, this is a big thing. Again, they will talk to you about or question safety. In commercial and sort of professional commercial sort of things, I've noticed there are some clashes in some of the information that they give you in this and in commercial installations. And yeah, it's quite interesting, sort of like comparing, apples to apples when it comes to some of the information, especially around mains. But nonetheless, safety considerations are really, really important. Read this sort of section. They will ask you questions on this, and make sure you understand this. Now, if you're training, that if you maybe your work or professional training sort of says something a little different, just take this on board for the exam, get it over and done with, and don't worry about it. Right, okay. And also do bear in mind that RF and traditional sort of electrics is kind of different. Right, okay, so then it goes on to batteries, accident and emergencies, antennas and feeders, working at height, RF burns, car batteries, headphones and hearing, which is a really big one. You'll be amazed how easily damaged hearing is, and I happen to know all about that sort of stuff. The other thing to bear in mind is obviously electric shocks, and the use of tools, and make sure that you make sure you wear all the appropriate PPE and stuff like that where needed. They talk about tidy shack and workshop. Well, not tidy. And they talk about field days and other premises. When you're actually away, sort of like in a field day, trips and falls and all that sort of stuff, trip slips, and risk of electric shock and all that sort of stuff, because I doubt very much whether it's very unlikely that they will be, in these sort of environments, that people will be taking all the full precautions that they should be taking, because they just don't know about it. This does go some way to try and point everyone in the right direction. They talk about the license schedule. Again, I think they give you a copy of this in the exam. I might be wrong, but again, it's well worth making sure that you've got a copy of this with you, just in your bag, just in case, I don't know, that you want to just keep learning all this sort of stuff. They talk about, they give you some examples and stuff, and some little bits and pieces there on. Yeah, they give you some examples and bits and pieces. They then talk about the practical assessment, and what to expect. They talk about the exam and what to expect, and they give you some ideas on how to approach it and stuff like that. Now, personally, as like I say, I've done an awful lot of exams over the last probably 10 or 15 years. I'm not fazed by exams at all, and that's the one thing that I would try and get over to anyone that's just about to tackle this exam. If you go in with a group of people, you've done the training course, they're your friends, you know them, they're it's not, you're not on your own, okay, and it's not life or death, okay. You're not saving babies or anything like that. It's kind of, you go in there, it's just an exam, and it's like 25 questions or 27 questions on ham radio, and you've got like 45 minutes or something to answer it. I don't know what it is now. Don't stress, all right. Get through the ones you can answer. If you don't answer a question, that's a question wrong, isn't it? You lost. So I would whiz through them, answer the questions you can answer. Make sure that you go back and then do the thinking about the ones that you can sort of answer. Make sure you get those ones out of the way, the calculation ones and all that sort of stuff. And the questions you can't answer, leave those until last, so that you can use the last of your time on them. But don't dwell on a single question too long, really don't, because it will eat you away. And should you have gone all the way through and then find yourself with 25 minutes left at the end of the exam, don't chisel away at your overall score, because by all means run through and check, but don't then suddenly start going through the whole paper, like changing them and thinking about that, because I've lost in over the years. I've missed out on scores because I've done exactly that, but just gone away and then chiseled away at my score until I had nothing left. It happens, but just don't do as I did. Just take your time, make sure you pace yourself, and that you get all the stuff answered. And please don't stress. It's just not stress stuff. All right. Right, so that pretty much is the end of the book. Chapter 15 just basically is a syllabus cross-reference. So that is it. Now, I said earlier on that where I work, they obviously have a training course available. So if you're anywhere near Surrey or Heathrow, then by all means give MLS a call, because again, they really do a fantastic course, and I'm not just saying that because I work there. Steve really takes this personally, this whole thing, and he's so good at doing it. So that pretty much leaves me to wrap this up. Thanks for watching. I hope that I've not bored the tears off of you, and that you found this useful in some way. And if it's not for you, then and you know someone that wants to come along, then share the video, let them sort of see, because this isn't difficult, or really isn't difficult. And all that really leaves me to say is, if you're going to take the exam, best of luck, and hope to hear you on air soon. So bye bye.